What's going on, Infected? It's Wolf with the Quarantine, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a game that was sent to me to review that's coming to Kickstarter by the name of Restaurant Detective. Now, Restaurant Detective is a social deduction game in the same vein as something like Werewolf, for example, or Chemo Panic. Kind of in the same vein as that, where you're going to have one facilitator, and then you have the rest of the players, and the facilitator kind of manages the game, and one person is the bad guy. Whereas, Werewolf, those are the werewolves. Chemo Panic is the thief. Chemo Panic doesn't have a facilitator, but you get the idea. And the game is all about using within the confines of the rules of the game, trying to deduce whether it's just random chance or whether you're using mechanics in the game to deduce who is the thief. So let's head over to the overview. In a game of Restaurant Detective, the players are trying to figure out who took a bite of the food. There has been food that's been stolen, and you're trying to figure out who has taken it. So throughout the course of the game, you're going to create a deck here of these cards, and one of them is going to be the guest, which is, for all intent and purposes, the facilitator. Another one is the food thief. You're going to shuffle these up and then deal one to each player. So in this case, this would technically be a 5-player game because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the facilitator. The facilitator doesn't actually have a character in play. And what you're going to do is you're going to set the board according to the rule book, and then you are going to be ready to play. Everybody's going to then close their eyes, similar to something like Werewolf, and the food thief, whoever got the food thief card, is going to point at a food. So let's say we point at these delicious ribs here. And the facilitator is going to take the plate, and they're going to put a red plate underneath it, and they have to memorize that, okay, ribs is the food that was eaten. Now, let's say Old Man Willikers here is the food thief. He's going to point at one of these hint cards. So let's say he points at, I don't know, chopsticks, because he's weird and eats ribs with chopsticks. Now, the facilitator is going to make everybody open their eyes. He's going to draw 7 cards, and you're going to divide them up. Now, when you divide them up, you have clues about the food, clues about the item here, and then things that don't do anything. So facilitator's gonna look through all these, and let's see, homely for ribs maybe. They can be pretty energetic, they're flashy, they could be soft, you're elated when you eat them, but they're not really addictive and there's not really chemicals in them. Now you're ready to play. So this is where the game, the intrigue of the game comes in. So each player is going to choose one of these plates here. They're going to choose it, and they're going to flip it over, and they're going to perform the action that's on it. And there's a whole bunch of different actions that allow you to draw cards and stuff like that. But once everybody's chosen a plate, then they are going to give one card to the facilitator, and the facilitator is going to look at those cards. And let's say you got all these. They're going to look at these cards and figure out which one of these columns it's going to go in. So their ribs aren't really for kids. They're not really. They're definitely not ugly. Have nothing to do with web, and they're not grand, or so you get the idea. And then you're going to do that 2 rounds. Then everybody gets one final guess to figure out who the food thief is and what their item is. And if they guess right, then they're declared the winner. There's a couple extra things. The food thief, or throughout the course of the game, you may be drawing these red plates, such as the ribs that we replaced. If you do, you're going to draw one of these cards, and you're going to look at it secretly. And so you're going to look at this, and you're going to put it face down. And the reason for that is, if you're on a diet, nothing happens, no big deal. But you keep it secret, keep it safe. However, if you're naughty boy and you sneak food too, that means you are an accomplice to the food thief, so you win if the food thief wins. And in a nutshell, that's how you play Restaurant Detective. So, what do I think about the game? Well, let's back up. What do I think about the artwork? So the artwork in the game is really, really neat. I love food artwork. Being kind of a fat guy, I enjoy eating. I enjoy food. So, for example, like Dragon's Crown, or pretty much any Vanillaware game for that matter, I love them because it makes the food look almost like porn. So I really like the art here. It's of course not as good as Vanillaware, but it's good. The artwork for the food makes the food look pretty tasty. I'd eat it. Then the anime style kind of artwork of all the characters is really cool. All of the different utensils, the pots, the pans, the chopsticks, all of that. It's all very well done. The graphic design is pretty pleasing. Those clue cards, they look like menus, little menus, which is kind of cool. So overall, the artwork gets an A for me. Arbitrary grade. But the gameplay, what do I think? So it's no secret that I'm not really a big fan of Werewolf. I find Werewolf less of a game and more of an activity. You could be super hyped up to play Werewolf, sit down, play, and this has happened to me a couple times at cons, no less, which is even more ridiculous. You hyped up to play, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna play a big 30-man game of Werewolf. Everybody sits down, and you're killed the first round for no real reason, just because random chance. Until you get 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds into Werewolf, you don't have a lot of information to go on, and you're just randomly picking people because fuck that guy. So that's my problem with Werewolf. So does this game suffer from the same problem? Not really. Where you still have that facilitator, which I don't like games that require a facilitator because generally speaking, that person's game is kind of boring. When I play Werewolf, I like being the facilitator because I don't like Werewolf. But in a game like this where it's not as boring as Werewolf, being the facilitator kind of sucks. But everybody else playing the game has it, so it's not bad. But it's not great either for a couple reasons. Now, the game does have quite a bit of tension because you may pick the wrong plate. Now you're an accomplice, and that causes problems and causes stress that you did not need because now you want to, you've been trying to, maybe the first round, everything was fine. You drew some cards. You're kind of narrowing down, okay, it's either that guy or that guy. But then now you flip over the wrong card. Now you're the accomplice. So now you got to throw everybody for a loop and go, no, I think it's this guy, and kind of get it off of who you think the bad guy is, the thief. So it also has that element where, of course, there's only one restaurant or one bad guy, or one thief. So there's no teams or anything. It's just everybody against one, which is part of my problem as well. It feels a little, when you play with more players, it feels a little underwhelming and a little underbalanced because really turn one, you could just know exactly who the thief is, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's probably my biggest complaint with the game is the way the gameplay works, which is, well, albeit really fun and pretty cool, because you have the facilitator and they're throwing these cards down, which are totally subjective, by the way. Maybe I find ribs flashy. Maybe you don't. Because, up until 10, 20 years ago, or 30, 40 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, ribs were considered a garbage cut of meat and were thrown away. Before anybody gets mad, I used to know a butcher, and that's what he told me. So, but maybe I consider them flashy, but you don't. So that's going to kind of throw some things off, which I guess is part of the game. But when you have that level of subjectiveness, that kind of tends to lead to some problems. But then on top of that, if you're spot on and you know your game group really well, and you put down these cards, round one you could literally go, oh yeah, I know he's the thief with this one. Boom, nailed it. And that's kind of a shame. That's honestly the biggest problem that we have with the game, is you can be outed basically turn one, depending on the luck of those cards. But aside from that, there's nothing inherently wrong with the game. So if you are a fan of Werewolf and, again, Chemo Mimi Panic, which I actually like better than Werewolf, which is why I keep bringing that one up. And I've heard this compared to Murder in Hong Kong, I think it's called, which I actually haven't played. So I guess if you're a fan of any of those that I previously mentioned, this game might be for you. But overall, the game just feels like Werewolf with extra steps. And that's really where the problem is those extra steps tend to be really one-sided, and it can be really, it can almost feel unfair when you're because I love being the bad guy or the traitor or the werewolf or the thief or the Cylon or whatever. I love traitor games. I love when I'm the bad guy and I've got to try to stay hidden and and you get that in this game at first. You're like, oh, yes, I'm the food thief. All right. And then you see those cards that come out, and you're like, crap, those just point straight at me. And you're like, well, and so you try to play it off, and a lot of the time you're not going to, because depending on the way those cards come out, that arrow is just going to point straight at you. If you play with higher player count, it seems to get worse because there's not really a lot of balancing for higher player counts. Anyways, that's pretty much, that is my review for Restaurant Detective. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time in the quarantine.